what is going on? Brian Carroll here, picking up with the article series that I'm doing about articles that I wrote a long time ago on powerxstrength.com, and I'm rehashing them. Some of the articles that I wrote a long time ago have changed my mind on a few things. Other things I've dug in even deeper. So here's another article. This one you're going to love. It's 4 BS moves, 4 BS social media moves that gain clout or gain attention, but are useless for a powerlifter in the context that you see them for. So we know that we're in the age of social media, and when I wrote this article 8 years ago, things were really starting to happen where people were always trying to brand themselves as having this new special exercise that's going to take your lifts to the next level. So let's get right into it. So the biggest thing, and you know it's coming, are hip thrusters. Hip thrusters with more weight than you can deadlift. We know why this is. We know who made them popular. Unfortunately, this is the same person that can't squat worth anything. They're doing hip thrusters and such with 700 plus pounds with a 400-pound squat. Guys, I know many of the top powerlifters. I know their programming. I've seen them train for the last 20 years. I can count on one hand of those that have done heavy hip thrusters with 500, 600, 700 pounds. You just don't do it. No one strong focuses on the hip thruster as a main lift. Hip thrusters, glute bridges can be good as like an accessory movement, but doing them and actually programming and telling people how much you can hip thrust, this is BS and you should avoid it. Do your hip thrusters all you want, but they do not matter. What you do on the hip thruster does not matter. It's a BS social media lift. Get over it. It does not matter. I make the point, did you see Andy Bolton when he was chasing 1,100 pounds on the deadlift or 1050 or whatever he was chasing? He ended up getting 1,003 or 1,014, but you never saw him posting videos of doing hip thrusts with 700, 800 pounds. It just doesn't happen like that. I can tell you I've never hip thrusted with anything over 135 pounds because it does not carry over. It's just a show off. It's created by a person that can do hip thrusters really good but can't do the other lifts, so they created a niche. Now for people that want to hip thrust heavy and want to build good glutes but aren't worried about being a strong powerlifter, that's another subject. I will not touch that, but for powerlifters and strength, doing heavy hip thrusters doesn't have any upside. It's only downside. It's a waste of your time. The next thing is sloppy shrugs, doing shrugs using body English. Now I know that can have some carryover, but doing them with way more weight than you can deadlift is not doing yourself any good. Loading the bar up with straps and doing 800, 900 pounds like I used to see people do when they have a 500-pound deadlift. Waste of time. People are only doing this to show off, just to have a bunch of plates on the bar, just like with the hip thrusters. It is not carryover. Now, overload training, yes, but doing it just for a social media lift, no good. The next thing is the half leg press. We see people do it all the time, and whenever someone tells you or if they know what they can leg press, avoid. I have no idea what I can leg press. Now, I get some people, they like to leg press, this and that. We're talking about strength training, strength athletes, powerlifters, powerlifting coaches specifically. They're doing these half leg presses, and they want to say, oh, I can leg press 1,300 pounds. There's a funny story where one of my friends was telling a physician's assistant and his family that I squatted the record at 1,306 pounds. And this guy who was all of about 180 pounds said to himself, well, I can't even leg press that much. So that gives you the context of the people that brag about their half leg presses and what it does. Now for bodybuilding and overloading, to build the quads, a half leg press can be great. It's a great exercise to build the quads, right? Especially if you're a bodybuilder, if you're a powerlifter that wants to lock out, keep the stress on the muscle, don't lock out all the way, don't go down all the way. I get that. Great for the quads, but if you know how much you can leg press and you brag about how much you half leg press or whatever, I would not pay attention to these type of people. Take a look in the mirror. These lifts do not carry over. They're good assistance work, like a heavy shrug could be, like a hip thruster can be, but it should not be a main movement and not something you brag about. You don't brag about how much you can hip thrust. Don't brag about how much you can shrug. Don't brag about how much you can half leg press. This is a common theme here. The last thing, another reason why you're following the wrong person. Or another thing that you need to stay away from when you see people talking about in strength is becoming hypermobile. Strength athletes need to be tied up and wound. They need to be wound tight. They need tight hamstrings. They need tight hips. Now, people that preach being hypermobile and being supple, this is for a different athletic endeavor. For strength athletes, you need to be explosive and wound tight like a spring. That said, you need fine-tuned mobility to be able to accomplish the lifts in the competition form to the standards of the competition. Now, you're not going to accomplish this by doing stretching and getting hypermobile. You'll be doing fine-tuned mobility exercises through a range of motion. For example, a goblet squat to open up the hips, something like that, just to grab a little bit of mobility or to warm the area that you need. But doing static stretching, I haven't done any stretching in over 9 years, and I feel good for it. Now, for someone that isn't trying to accomplish ultimate strength or ultimate athleticism on the powerlifting platform, it might be a little bit different, but becoming hypermobile for a strength athlete can be a death sentence. You want to be wound tight and have just enough mobility to achieve what you need to do in competition. You see people that can bottom out a squat and get down so easy, they're not having any type of recoil or stretch reflex to help them come back up. Also, when the muscles are very loose, you end up putting the brunt of the force on the joint, which you don't want. You want the muscles to be absorbed, to be able to absorb that, similar to an exoskeleton suit. When someone's wearing a tight suit that wraps them up like shrink wrap, it makes the muscles stiffer and it takes more weight and more tension to lower down in the hole. You want your muscles to kind of replicate that in ways. Again, you don't want the muscles to take the force of the, you want the muscles to take the force of the load, not your joints. So becoming hypermobile can be problematic. I've seen it. Stiffer is better, but within reason. You don't want to be so stiff that you can only squat, this far and you can't move your hips, or you can't touch your chest when you're bench pressing, but halfway. Again, every person's going to be different, but if you're chasing becoming hypermobile for the sake of strength athletics, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. That's my personal opinion. Show me someone that's hypermobile. I'll show you 25 other people that are stiff and rigid that lift big weights. There's always exceptions to the rule. There's people out there that can do splits like Ronnie Coleman. Dan Green is very mobile. There's other people out there that are very mobile. Remember, these are not the rule. They're the exception to the rule. So blindly doing mobility work, blindly stretching is a waste of your time. It can lead to injury. Remember, you need enough to perform the lifts in their competition form and not much more than that. Your standard will be a little bit different than the next person, depending on your genetic makeup, your natural mobility, and what you're trying to accomplish. So once again, for bullshit, social media, hyped exercises or modalities that you need to stay away from if you're trying to be a strength athlete, heavy hip thrusts with more that you can deadlift, sloppy shrugs with 1,000 pounds just to show off on social media, the half leg press when people can brag about how much they can leg press, and then lastly, getting hypermobile, just showing off how much mobility you have. It's silly. We're more worried about how much you can squat, not how much you can mobilize your hips and how you can set your butt on the floor. So again, there's going to be exceptions to these rules. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of these moves, but proceed with caution and don't just blindly start doing heavy hip thrusts, heavy sloppy shrugs, heavy half leg presses, getting hypermobile. At the end of the day, you need to have a specific goal for everything that you're doing in the gym. And that's what kind of burns me a little bit when I read stuff and I see people promoting a certain thing. And it's like, what's the goal? What is the goal of doing 1,000,000 pounds on the hip thrust, but you can only deadlift 400 pounds? So you kind of get where I'm coming from. So once again, check out this full article on powerxstrength.com. The article's below. Thank you so much, and I hope you're enjoying this series. If you're enjoying this series, let me know below. Check out PowerX Strength for more articles going back over 8 years ago, and I'll see you soon. Thank you so much. So much for watching today. Please subscribe, like, and share if you enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.